right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at our final Family Connection hours of the semester. Hope you're all enjoying having your students home, or at least having your students out of classes,
Listen to
finishing
this
up things
Auburn
for
thing,
the
honey.
spring semester.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and toss it over now to our Associate Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Lady Cox. She's going to share some information about kind of how to evaluate the semester with your student and make sure that everything is going according to plan and you're having those critical conversations. So without further ado, Lady, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. To get us started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. So some of you may remember me from Camp War Eagle. I typically talk to our families when they start on campus. But if you don't, I'm also a parent of a college student. I have a student that is just finishing her freshman year of college. Unfortunately, she is not at Auburn. She is a long way away on the other side of the country. But I've had a stakeholder meeting with my daughter at the end of her fall semester, and we'll do one again with her when she gets home in just a couple of weeks. For the purpose of this conversation, though, I'm also going to talk about my kids frequently because, in addition to the two biological kids I have a collection of other kids that I spend a lot of other time with, guiding them through their college experience. And so today, when I do talk about my kids, I'm talking about some of them as well. And between that collection of awesome students that I get to work with, we have been through it all. So I'll tell you a bunch of stories of real life examples of my kids today as we go through. So now I want to take you back in time. If you did come to Camp War Eagle and you got a chance to hear either Kevin or me talk, you probably heard us talk about this college contract. And the contract is still going to be kind of the basis of this stakeholders conversation. And what I mean by that is the topics that you're going to talk about are going to be very similar to what you talked about if you had that conversation with your student then. So today, the big things that we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is that stakeholders meeting, what exactly is in it, why you should have one. Those topics, we're going to dive into them a little bit deeper, and then also create a plan for moving forward. So what is a stakeholders meeting? I love this image from The Bear. And so if you've watched The Bear, it's a TV show about a chef, the fellow pictured on the left, and the restaurant that he runs is funded by his uncle, who is the fellow on the right. And so this is an example of a stakeholders meeting that they are having where they're talking about the investment that his uncle is making into his restaurant. When I talk about investing in your student and financially supporting your student and just being there for your kid along the way, particularly when I do this on social media, I get a lot of questions from parents and they will say things like, but wait, I thought we were supposed to step back. I will tell you that you have not heard that from me entirely. And what I mean by that is if you are investing in your student to be at Auburn, and most of our parents are investing significantly for their student to be here, I do think you are fiduciary responsible for their education, and you should talk to them about how it's going and have these types of conversations. I'll also say that students today are different than when I was in college or when my parents were in college, et cetera. And there is a need to make sure that they understand the parameters of what's happening and just providing them support along the way. We know that our students are more connected to us as parents now than ever before, and particularly after COVID, there is a close-knit relationship between students and their parents. I want to have this conversation with you today so that you are fully equipped to have a stakeholders conversation with your student and you can point them in the right direction. But what is this conversation that you're going to have, and what is it that you're actually going to talk about? This is a chance to have a check-in with your student in a more formal way and really sit down and talk about how did the semester go? What's the plan for the future? And also to celebrate their success, because college is hard. Your student is figuring out a lot of things in a new and different way, in a different environment. And it's good to have that conversation with them. We also have a lot of folks today that are on the call that are parents of juniors and seniors. And there's a need to have a conversation about what's next, whether it's getting to graduation or even, what happens after graduation. And so this stakeholders meeting is just a time to kind of talk through all of this. The topics that you're going to discuss in that meeting. First, we're going to touch on grades, finances, extracurricular activities, progression toward graduation. These 4 things are the same things from that college contract we talked about at Camp War Eagle. I've added in a new topic for you to talk about as well. This is something that you can't set expectations for with your student at the very beginning, but they're going to be able to talk to you more now about how they are doing from a health perspective, both mental and physical health. But these are the kind of conversation headings that you need to think about for this talk. So as you plan this meeting, and I hope you really do spend time planning this meeting, there's a few things that will help you set the stage. Straight out of the gate, the most important thing is, where are you going to have this conversation? I chose, when I met with my daughter, we met in the graduate hotel here in Auburn, and we got a cup of coffee, and then we sat down at their community table. Because it was between semesters, it was very quiet there. And I encourage you to do this in a place that everybody enjoys to be, a kind of maybe like a fun place to go, a place that can be quiet. But I do think it can be kind of good to have that conversation in a public place. I don't know about y'all, but I can get really animated with my daughter and like, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or what about this? And I find that I'm a little bit too animated sometimes in the comfort of my own home. And so it's good for me to be in a public space to just kind of remember, like, okay, keep my voice down. Let's talk through things in this way. It doesn't mean that that makes it sound like, okay, I was expecting bad news. That's not the case at all. But it is kind of also a fun situation to be in, to have this stakeholders conversation. Once you get to the place and you've sat down and you've got your notes and everything, the way you're going to start this meeting is with congrats and celebrations. We'll talk about what that looks like in a second. Then you're going to go through the basics of what you need to check in with your student. And then you're going to wrap it up with a plan for the future. When you end this meeting, you should be able to have written notes that you email to everybody in that session. So for our family, it was my daughter, my husband, and I, 3 of us. When we were all done, my husband sent us all 3 an email and was like, here are the things we talked about. Here's the things that we need to do. So I want to talk a little bit about that congrats and celebrations component. Regardless of what you find out later on in this meeting, let's start with some happy kudos, pats on the back, all of that good stuff. College is hard. It's hard for our students, and there is definitely something to celebrate. It could be something as basic as you got through your foreign language requirement, or it could be something, that was really difficult for your student. Like if your student went and talked to their professors during office hours, congratulate them on that, celebrate them doing that, but really start off with some wins. Remind them of how proud you are of them, how they've done really well. Listen throughout the semester about what's happening, and then remember those things and share those with them as big wins. And then I think it's good to start off with grades. So the reason I say start off with grades is this is probably going to be one of the more difficult conversations in this, but it also speaks to how everything else is going in your student's college experience. I shared this quote that the world is run by C students for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't believe that your student has to have a 4.0 to be successful in life. And I tell people this all the time. I am a proud graduate with a 2.8 in my undergrad program. You don't have to have a 4.0. You do have to have very high grades for certain programs, law school, vet school, things like that. But you don't have to have a 4.0. However, you and your family may have grade requirements that you need to check in with your student. For example, a lot of our scholarship programs at Auburn require a 3.0. So you need to know, did your student make their grades? Do they still have their scholarship for the next semester? That's a basic component. But then I think there's also some other good things to think about. For almost everybody, a 2.5 or a 2.75 is the bottom of where we need to be. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to progression toward graduation. But your student does need to be making some solid grades. Rarely, do D's count. Those are typically only like for electives. And then an F does not count toward your student's GPA. A couple of things you might see when you sit down and look at grades with your students. It's not uncommon, particularly in certain courses, for your students to make a D or fail a course. And that does not scare me. When that happens once or twice, that does not scare me. Especially if the student is failing a course that is very opposite from their interests and their skill set. So for example, I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with an engineering student that really struggled to pass his English class or her English classes. Very normal. That is not uncommon at all. On the flip side, it's not uncommon for liberal arts students to struggle in math. So be aware of that. But it also guides your conversation to know, okay, my student is struggling in this. Maybe we don't, if we're just taking that as an elective, that let's not take math electives, for example, if that's a challenge. Excuse me. Another thing I want to point out about grades. If you are concerned, genuinely concerned about the accuracy of the information your student gives you, I encourage you to have them bring their laptop and have them log in and show you as they pull up their grades with you. It is possible that you have a 100% completely honest student who tells you the truth all the time. I'm going to tell you, in the little tribe that I get to work with, I get an edited version of the truth. They hit the highlights really well, but they may not always tell me all of the details. So I always say, all right, if we're going to talk about your grades, you're going to have to pull it up. And I want you to actually pull up AU Access and let me see your unofficial transcript as we go through your grades. I think it really helps you to have a better picture of what's happening. And there is a big difference in, I think I'm going to make a B and I made a B. You need to know what their actual grades are when you have this conversation. Another good conversation to have with your students is about finances. This is another one where I can't give you like specifics of what your family should do. I can just tell you that it is fascinating to hear what's happening with families, and it's important that you have a regular kind of cadence to talking to your students about money. Real life story, a family called me in December and they said, we have got to have some help. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, our daughter is spending $1,000 a month on top of what we budgeted for her in college. And I was like, what does she spend $1,000 on? And so they did a little digging and it was all on DoorDash. That is not sustainable for their family, not sustainable at all. And it was all late night food purchases. There needed to be a conversation in their family. there probably need to be a conversation in their family like in September or October. But in December, they were able to sit down and talk about, okay, we can't do this. Like, this is just not financially feasible for our family. It's possible that your student does need more money than they've gotten this, while they're here on campus, or it's possible that they feel like they don't have enough money and it's a different kind of threshold. So one time in the same exact week, I had a mom call me and she said, my daughter says that we're not giving her enough money because she can't get her nails done every week. And literally just a few minutes later, I got a call from a mom who said, I'm giving my son $10 a month, and he says that's not enough to buy toothpaste every month. Both of those things might be true. You kind of have to decide within your family. A couple of reminders. If you heard me at Camp War Eagle, you know that I think the world of the experience that comes from working while you're in college. So this might be a good time to talk to your student about getting an on-campus job or working here in Auburn. I can tell you, based on the signs I see everywhere, there are a lot of places there that are hiring here in town. It also may be something where you need to revisit your financial aid package, apply for more scholarships, or consider taking out more loans. No matter what, this is a good time to talk about those things with your student. Another great thing to talk to your student about are extracurricular activities. So we know that your student is here for an education, but a lot of the things, the skills that they need to be really effective after they graduate, they learn those in those outside the classroom activities. Talk to your student and see how this part of their life is going. I can tell you sometimes, I'm shocked when a student will say, well, I haven't even thought about joining a club or an organization yet. And here they are, a junior or senior, and thinking about it. Start talking to them about the value of doing that. Remind them they're going to need references when they go to apply for their first job. And, an organization advisor is a great person to provide a reference for them. It's also a great way to meet friends. As part of this conversation too, you may have one of those kids who has joined way too many things. And so talk to them about that, because it might be time to let one of those things go, reframe, okay, wait, what's really important? How much time are we spending on this? And making sure that that is in alignment with the rest of their goals. This is an important conversation to have too. The next thing to talk about with your student is progression toward graduation. There's two components to progression toward graduation. The first is you want to make sure that your student is taking the courses that they need to graduate. I see all the time when I'm looking up a student's grades, I will see bowling as a course. Unless your student is in physical education, bowling is not something that typically is on their plan of study. I'm sharing that with you because that's part of the reason why you really want to look at that unofficial transcript, where you can also ask your student to pull up like their degree works information and actually see, okay, how are all of my classes fitting in? Have I completed my math requirements? Have I completed my foreign language requirements, etc.? You want to make sure that your student is taking the courses that they need to take to get the degree in the program that they are in. And that is really critical. And I would love to tell you that all of that is going to happen in their academic advising conversation. But as a reminder, an academic advisor is going to have a conversation with your student. Your student can then sign up for those classes, but they could also change them. And they won't meet with that academic advisor again until the middle of the next semester. So a lot of this is on the student, and it's good just to have, parent support checking in with them on this. The other piece about that, the progression toward graduation, pay close attention to that GPA. So every degree program at Auburn requires a 2.0 GPA. But most of them also require a 2.0 in their major course of study. So for example, let's say that your student is getting a degree in English. In those English classes, they have to have a 2.0 or higher in that program. And I see this sometimes where a student may actually have a 2.3 or a 2.4 overall as their cumulative grade point average. But if they don't also have that 2.0 in their major, they won't graduate. So you need to check on both of those things. And it's a really good conversation to have with your student. And after you've gone through all of that, it's a good time to check in on their health. And this is something that I think sometimes we do a great job as parents. Sometimes we don't do a great job as parents. But this was one thing that really caught us off guard when we talked to our daughter at the stakeholders meeting. And so we asked, all right, well, tell us what's going on with your health. Now, full disclosure, she had a very bizarre injury that happened on move-in day. And so we really were more worried about how is your foot? She's on the cross country and track team at her university. That was kind of where my head was. But once we asked the question about, all right, how healthy are you? How are you feeling? It led us into a conversation that took us in a very different direction. So tiny bit about our family. We are an early to bed, early to rise family. I always knew there would be some transition when our daughters went to college, but for our oldest daughter, she just simply was not getting enough sleep and loved her roommate. Having a roommate was fantastic, but they had very different schedules. She also shared with us that she's pretty freaked out about the fact that her dorm flooded like 2 days before she came home for the holiday break. And so she received an email that said, when you come back, you are not going to be in this residence hall anymore. You're going to have to move across campus to another dorm. And that was a lot of stress to think about, okay, how am I going to move all of my stuff from one room to another room, doesn't have a car on campus. How is all this going to be figured out? This was the part of the conversation that really left us where we realized none of us had the answers and we had to figure some things out. It also, though, helped us to have a reframing conversation with her. She was leaving her roommate, and the room she was going to be assigned to moving forward is a private room. But having this conversation as a family allowed us to reframe that with her to say, like, well, I know you hate to leave your roommate, but on the bright side, from a sleep perspective, you will be completely in control of your sleep schedule now. And so this should be a little bit better. There's no telling what your student is going to tell you from a physical and mental health standpoint, but having that conversation is great. And of course, as parents, we care about this probably more than anything else. So we want to make sure we have time for that in our conversation too. Kind of to wrap up the conversation, you're going to create a plan for the future. And so, like, based on what I was just telling you about, our plan for the future was our daughter emailed the director of housing, asked some specific questions about that move. And then we talked about, like, all right, how are we going to think about this sleep situation in a slightly different way? But there were other things that we talked about too, extracurricular activities, conversations to have with your academic advisor, other things. And all of that, we wrote that out and we emailed it to the three of us afterwards. It's a great opportunity to revisit it. If you do that and you have this plan for the future and you send this out, please, please, please include those things to celebrate in this email as well. The plan for the future should be kind of fun and exciting. And if we think about this kind of like an Oreo or a compliment sandwich, you're going to start off with the good stuff. You're going to have some tough conversations here in the middle. And then that plan for the future should be a really happy conversation too. Like, okay, listen, you know what? We had a tough semester. There's some things we got to figure out, but let's go ahead and put our plan in place and talk about that for the semester. Again, just to kind of highlight this again, after the meeting, we really want to celebrate this. You want to do this in a way that your student is excited about doing it again next semester. And even if you're coming from a place where you got a lot of hurdles your student needs to get through, you can still celebrate having the conversation, having time together, having a plan for the future. All of those things are really great. So making sure that you celebrate it, it's really good. I'll also say we just had graduation here. Unfortunately, every year I've worked with families for over 20 years now. Every year after every big graduation season, or sometimes right before, every single time I work with families that were stunned to find out their student is not graduating. And typically they are nowhere near graduating. Having these conversations can prevent you from being in a situation like that. So really, even if this is just like a celebration you are having with yourself, know that having this stakeholders meeting can prevent you from being in that type of situation. So this might sound a little bit too good to be true. And some of you are probably sitting there thinking like, yeah, this is not going to happen. This is just not going to be, this is not going to go that well. So let's talk in advance about some challenges that you might have during this conversation so that you feel even better equipped for them. First challenge that might happen, your student might refuse to participate. They might just say, nope, not going to do it. Or, like a lot of college students, they just don't have time. They're super busy, etc. If you are contributing financially to their degree, you hold some cards here and you can play those cards. You don't have to pay for tuition for the fall until early August. So you've got all summer for your student to agree to sit down and talk to you. And for those families that your student is super hesitant to have this conversation with you, that would concern me and would make me want to have that conversation even more. So remember, you've got some leverage at the end of the semester, the end of the summer. I would go ahead and make a plan and let them know. We're going to have the conversation. Once we have a good plan for the semester ahead, that's when I will transfer the money over for the next semester. Another challenge, you may already know your student is outspending their budget. And if that's the situation, you can be better prepared when you walk into this meeting to be able to kind of give them some real facts to talk to them about, like, hey, this is what we budgeted for college. This is what you spent this past semester. We need to talk about this. If you want to, this is a lot of times the situation where mom and dad can do more of the research before you get into this meeting. Anything that you can see in advance to be able to take to them, I think is helpful. And so in this conversation, you might be the one saying, here are things that we all need to consider as a family. And so your dynamics may have changed at home, financially, what you can contribute, but maybe as a family, you do talk about, okay, the need for scholarships, the need for an on-campus job, or the need to change what your financial aid looks like, what those student loan packages look like. Another challenge might be that your student is struggling with their health. This is no different than if they're in high school. You have had a long time with your students, so you may know, okay, this is something they've been struggling with for a while. In college students, mono is an incredibly common issue. And some students, they'll have mono, they'll be down for a week, and then they're right back at it. Others, this is something that's much longer lasting, and it keeps popping up and affecting them and their grades on campus. If you hear talking to your student like, okay, wait, we've got something larger that we're not sure what to do, please reach out to Kevin or me, and we can provide support, whether you need information about here locally or anything else that we can provide. Know that we're here to help answer those questions. And then I hope this is not the situation, but perhaps your student is failing many of their courses. So reiterate what we said earlier. Um, if they're failing one class, maybe they're making a D in a class, that sometimes can be really informative and helpful to find out why. It could be they're an engineering major and they're just not doing well in English. It could be that situation. Or it could be, you know what, they're an English major and they can't pass creative writing. That's a different kind of challenge when your student is failing the courses in their plan of study. If your student is failing a lot of these classes, there's probably something else going on. And so you do want to take time and really talk to them about it. You may also, your plan of action may be, you know what, we're going to call and find out what are other resources on campus. Let's do some research and find out. You could find out about the writing center, the tutorings, that we have on campus, all of those things. And again, this is something that Kevin and I are happy to help you with. Kevin doesn't say this as much as maybe as we should, but he has many years as an academic advisor and a lot of great ideas about how to support your student academically. So know that you can reach out to us to talk through, okay, what are some strategies that our student could do? We can talk to you about everything from tutoring to what's the best way if you feel like your student needs to change their major. We can help you with all of that. But there might be other challenges as well, and feel free to use the chat or to Kevin, are there any questions that we have from folks about other specific challenges?
I don't see any in the chat right now. I'd be open to, and if you want to unmute your mic and speak out loud or put in the chat, just any other specific challenges that your student may be facing or that you may have questions about. I'll add one as well, just while we're on the topic. And we get this a lot after the first semester or the first few weeks of class, but some students take a little bit longer to find that sense of community on campus as well. So a lot of our students are thrilled to come back in the fall, and some have a little bit more apprehension because they're a little bit more comfortable at home. So that's another conversation that we're happy to assist with is as far as getting involved and finding community. We've got a lot of great resources and tips. We got great folks over in student involvement that help out with that as well.
And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if I can figure that out.
I got it for you, lady.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
Yeah. And they don't have to be about challenges specifically. They can be about anything related to this presentation. Would also add, I know someone mentioned it in the chat earlier, that this is being recorded and this is going to be shared with all registered attendees. So if you kind of came in a little late or you had to drop out a little bit early, that'll be emailed to you this afternoon along with a survey just to help us better evaluate all of our webinars, but this one in particular to make sure that we can improve that moving forward. All right. No questions in the chat at the moment. Here we go. What about stellar students who may not be doing what the parent believes is enough to find internships and a job? So let's just say, hypothetically, in this situation, a student is excelling academically, but maybe not so much outside of the classroom, and particularly where it relates to internships and job search as they get closer to graduation.
So I go back to, this is kind of a two-way street. And so I'm going to contribute financially to your college education. In exchange, I need for you to do all of those things to be successful. And so, I think asking your student, like, okay, well, what have you done? Have them show you their resume. If perhaps they have applied to several places and they haven't had a great response, take a look at their resume and see if there's something else you can see there.
Yeah.
You can have them set up a meeting with the Career Center. And that's another great place to start, depending on your student's college. They might even have an in-house career center for that. But I find, unfortunately, particularly our students that just need to get a job, the ones that need to earn extra money, a lot of times it comes down to, okay, listen, this is how much we're giving you every month. That's it. So if you want to have spending money, if you want to have money to do other things, you're going to have to also contribute as well. And for a million reasons, working while your student is in college, it's excellent for them.
Yeah, completely agree. And I'll add in as well, usually once a semester at least, there is some type of part-time job or internship fair on campus as well. Usually it's right here in the Melton Student Center, so that's another great opportunity. Student Rec is often hiring a ton of people as well, and sometimes they'll have expos to present the different opportunities that they have as well. So sometimes students going to send simply one event and kind of put their name in the hat for multiple positions. All right, just a comment. Thank you so much for holding this format. Love it as a parent of an incoming freshman. Thank you, Anne. Anybody else? We have a few more minutes designated here. Once again, this is going to be recorded and shared and disseminated. But if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them now. If not, we can certainly conclude and hope that everybody enjoys their summer and look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Hey,
Thank you.
Kevin, I do have one quick question. I
Yeah.
thank you all again so much. This is Mark. I was just wondering, I'm sure you do, and probably at Camp War Eagle, you mentioned it, but with the work on campus, that kind of open house, do they also have one of those for extracurriculars during the the new semester? I know like they had I can't remember how many days it was. That was really cool to start the semester. But anyway, I'm sure there is, but I just wanted to touch with Abigail about that because she didn't really do a lot of extracurriculars, but we've been mentioning it. So, will there be something like that in the fall right away? I guess
Yeah, so we call it the first 56, and there
56.
are,
Got it.
yep, it's typically on Wednesday. We call those O days or
Mm.
organization days.
Mhm.
And students will be able to go down the Haley Center concourse and see different clubs and organizations, and that's how they recruit members. But there's also other organization fairs, but they do primarily happen on Wednesdays, which is really great.
Yeah.
Midday, right near the student center. But I think that's a good way to get started. It also helps. You can go online too. You know what your student is involved in, and sometimes it's nice to kind of like, just mention things to your kid. I know
Okay.
I know that sounds silly, but like I read the newspaper where my daughter goes to college. And so like I told her, I was like, hey, there's a new coffee shop open downtown. She had no idea. And so like I think it's okay for us to nudge and provide them with some gentle coaching still.
Great. Thank y'all.
Absolutely. And I'll say one additional thing, Mark. In addition to the first 56 and O days the lady mentioned, one of the first 56 events is generally the involvement fair, which is just like O days, except more organizations are generally involved. For reference, that was on August 21st last year. I assume it will probably be about the same time this year. So that's an opportunity for your student to start the semester off on a good note, getting to know a lot of different organizations and opportunities as well.
Fantastic. Thanks.
All right. Well, once y'all have these conversations, know that you might have more questions. And so please reach out to Kevin or to me whenever that happens. Know that we're here to support you. And I know we have an incoming parent here. So just know that we're looking forward to seeing you at Camp War Eagle. We get started next week. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. As Lady said, don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can do anything to support moving forward. As mentioned, this is being recorded and it's going to be sent out along with the survey later on this afternoon. So thanks again, and War Eagle.
Thank you all. War Eagle.